We're still ahead of the election. So if you're watching this, we don't know what happened. So if the world did end, but you did somehow find this video.
Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, just thanks for watching, honestly, still.
Everything's burning around you, and you're like, Matt and Brian up to.
Exactly. They're like, this video didn't age well.
Not at all.
Welcome back. We say it every time. I don't know where you're coming back from because YouTube videos are standalone, so there's no commercials.
One day somebody's going to be setting down their milk on the counter and they'll start our video and they're going to be like, thanks, guys.
They're like, oh my gosh.
How'd they know?
This is perfect synchronicity. I love it. Oh, man. Well, welcome to another Undoubtedly Dallas adventure.
Yes.
Today we're talking about, this is actually a pretty serious topic.
Yes.
Should you buy a house in 2021?
No, don't.
No, don't. That would be, yep.
That'd be stupid. Yeah, end of the video.
That's
Bye.
the
Thanks for
end.
joining us. See you later. That's not the answer.
We pride ourselves on being the good, bad, and the ugly of our profession.
Yep.
So we're just going to give it to you straight. Should you or should you not buy a house in 2021? Let's start here. What are we talk to thousands and thousands of people a year about real estate. It's what we do for a living. What do you think are the biggest concerns people have about buying in the next couple of months going into 2021? Let's start there.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's two super obvious ones as we sit here in October of 2020,
Sure.
right? Because that's relevant to this conversation.
Yep.
Coronavirus, COVID-19 is here, and that's making people make all kinds of decisions for or against things that maybe they wouldn't.
Sure.
And we're about 15 days from an election that's going to do something. Here's what I do know about the election. Half people are going to be pissed off.
Yeah, I would say at least.
You know
For
what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like, I just think those are the two biggest factors initially, as I'm sitting here just kind of looking at the world landscape, that I'm hearing people just not really sure about what's going to happen next and not know what to expect in 2021.
And I think I mean, obviously, one, I don't want to downplay anybody's concerns about anything. Those are very real, tangible things to be concerned about, for sure. It's just, it also asks the question, when is the right time to buy a house? Because if I'm being objective, right, there's always reasons to be a little bit worried. We've sort of been living in this doomsday scenario since like the 70s, right? Yep. There's like always something to be kind of scared about. So we get really like down to the nitty gritty. One of the big things is the election, right?
Yes.
And obviously, this is talking about 2021, but we're still ahead of the election. So if you're watching this, we don't know what happened. So if the world did end, but you did somehow find this video.
Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, just thanks for watching, honestly, still.
Everything's burning around you, and you're like, Matt and Brian up to.
Exactly. They're like, this video didn't age well.
Not at all. These guys are idiots. Look at them. They're both dead now.
I didn't see that coming, right? But that's one of the big things, right? And one of the most important things when you're buying a home is obviously value.
Yeah.
And like, what's the market look like? And interest rates, right? You don't want to pay too much and you don't want to pay too high interest. To address the concern about the election, I know one thing for certain, right? Interest rates are at, and I feel like we say this all the time, but then it also tends to become true because somehow they tend to get lower. Interest rates are at historic lows.
I feel like we've been saying that for like 5 years.
We've been saying this since like 2016, but somehow it still rings true, right? They're like sub 3 right now on a lot of things. Here's the one thing I do know. No matter who wins the election, it's not going to drive interest rates any lower. That much is for damn sure.
And I think that's the kind of like hidden like term that when we're talking about the election, I'm not talking about it from a social perspective. No. That's a whole other video. Yeah. We are human beings and we have feelings just like everybody else does. But talking about it from a real estate perspective, the election, I feel like maybe affects two things. It affects interest rates and it affects taxes.
Yes.
And those are the two things financially that when we're evaluating the home purchase that I think most home buyers and home sellers are going to be looking at just from a pocketbook perspective.
It's one of the most important things.
Yeah.
It's money out of your pocket, right?
Yep.
So neither of those things are going to get lower after the election, I would imagine, right? So if you're trying to trying to lock in your rate, buy as soon as possible. Because I mean, that's just in the most objective way. If you're looking to pay as little interest as you possibly can on the money you're borrowing, lock it in while the rates are really, really low. Outside of that, what happens in the election? Look, again, we don't want to alienate anybody from a political or social awareness perspective or anything like that. there's just always something you can be worried about. Unless you think that you're fundamentally not going to need a place to live after the election, it really shouldn't change your outlook too much on whether or not you're going to purchase a home.
Exactly. And like, look, I know everybody's watching this like, oh, shocking, 2 real estate agents are telling us to buy a home.
Yeah,
like, one, obviously, but secondarily.
If you think that, met us though, because we're pretty hard on ourselves.
We really are. And I think the flip side of that is, I'll still say the same thing to you that I would say in any realm. Almost for every person in every scenario, owning a home is a better situation than than renting anything else. What is the number? A homeowner's, what's the 32 times more net worth or something like that?
Something like that. It's dozens of times more, right? Which is, that's of course, right? You have a tangible asset that you're leveraging to become more wealthy day in and day out, really. And I think that's probably the next thing that people would probably cite as maybe a concern is, we've got a lot of concerns about, jobs and mortgage forbearance and foreclosures and just the general overarching idea that the housing market is going to take a crash, right? Yeah. Here's what I would say to that. There are so many people with money on the sidelines, investors and things like that have been waiting for that to happen, which creates this sort of vacuum effect, right? Let's just say there's somewhere in the United States, there is billions of dollars waiting to be invested in residential real estate, right? I know this from when I first started in real estate. I used to work for a real estate investment trust, and I'd sell them rental properties. At the time, that was 2011. That was kind of the middle of the recovery here in North Texas.
Sure.
And what was happening was, whereas right now, if you're going to invest in a home as an investor, you really want to get a deal, right? You want to get like 70% ARV, right? After repaired value. That's kind of where you want to buy it at 70 cents on the dollar, maybe. It's kind of a general rule of thumb, Back then, because we were in the middle of the recovery, they were paying 95 cents on the dollar. The market stayed so level here in North Texas because everybody wanted it to crash so they'd get a deal. Well, then when it started to go down, everybody was jumping on deals, which then drove demand right back up. So if you're worried about a big foreclosure, nationwide foreclosure thing, there's too many people. It's just like the stock market, just like anything else. When you have people waiting for an event to happen so they can invest in it, that then drives the market right back up. So there's just too many people with too much money that are willing to spend it on investment deals. You're just not going to see the home value get cut in half. It's just not going to happen.
That's the big thing, too. I think what people need to understand when they start, because, again, we're not speaking to the savvy investor when we're making these comments. We're talking to people who maybe get sucked into a little bit of the belief that, A, buying a foreclosure is just easy, right? Because I have buyers all the time who will come to me and be like, I want to look at foreclosed properties. Like, I bet you don't.
You better show up on Tuesday at the courthouse with a cashier's check. Yes. That's the only way you're getting it.
And that's the thing is, and I think a lot of people think that part of the process is a lot easier than it really is. And I think the people that are being deterred from buying because they think that it's going to fall through the ground, think that they're going to buy a house for $300,000 and a year from now it's going to be worth $175,000. Like, that's just not how it works. And if it does, I take you back to our earlier point. It's because the entire world is burning to the ground, and you are not going to care.
Bigger problems, for sure.
You're going to be in a lot bigger trouble than that.
And I would think, I think the third thing to really bring up here as we start to kind of wrap things up is, whether it's an election, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's like all the things we can be afraid of going into 2021 that we didn't foresee as even being issues in 2020, like, understand that your life is very localized.
Yes.
Meaning, like, there are parts of the country like Chicago that never really quite even recovered from the economic or from the Great Recession, right? Not the same way that, here in North Texas we did, or other parts of the Northeast, that there are still housing markets that are kind of recovering from that. That's because they were exposed in different ways. There's different groups and demographics of people that live there that were in certain industries, so on and so forth, right? We are in North Texas, right? So I want to address that kind of specifically. But as a overarching idea, I would say stop listening to the news on a national level and forming your opinions about whether to buy a house based on that, because nothing is nationalized. Meaning, like, there's just almost nothing out there newsworthy or like news-wise.
There is no good news out there, right?
Yeah. Super true.
Right.
It's also true that no matter how bad the news gets, it affects everybody differently.
Yes.
So listening to it on a national level and making decisions that way is kind of silly, right?
Yes.
The reality is, and I'll just use North Texas as an example, one of the reasons that we are so much less likely to see any type of real big dip in housing is we have incredibly favorable tax laws here that when you start to turn as a nation, you start to turn into an economic, downturn or recession or something like that. People look to cut expenses any way they can. Mm-hmm. Taxes are one of those things, right? That's why so many corporations have relocated to North Texas. It's a big savings for them. It's a place where you invest in the local economy. That's a really, really big deal. That's going to affect housing a lot more than most other things that are on the ballot this year, that are on the docket this year, right? So just think on a localized level. Stop listening to what's going on in the country. Care more about what's going on in your area and whether or not it makes sense to buy based on those things.
And we have the unique kind of situation here where we can be a top 4 like metropolis in the country and probably have the lowest cost of living out of those top 4, right?
By a mile, too.
I mean, Chicago might be the only one. I don't know what the cost of living in Chicago is.
Yeah.
I know it's way cheaper to live here in L.A. or New York.
Housing-wise, Chicago's similar. L.A. and New York are in a different
off the charts, right?
Yeah.
So, like, as you're looking around, especially if you're watching this video from somewhere else and you're trying to figure out if you should just move here to Dallas or whatever, like the affordability, while prices have went up, it's still one of the most affordable major areas to live in the entire country.
Yep, 100%. So if you guys are thinking about making that leap and heading on down here to beautiful North Texas, give us a call. Let us know. Our information is always down below.
Absolutely.
We appreciate you hanging with us for another episode.
Yeah, so definitely buy a house next year.
Yeah, I think was the consensus.
That's what we came up with.
That's exactly what it was.
All right. Well, undoubtedly Dallas. We'll see you later.